And many times they're in a wheelchair, they stand up and they'll start walking around. I got a woman in Ohio I worked on recently, and she's walking around. And I said, when the last time you walked? She said, it's been 5 years.
There's been a major breakthrough in chronic pain in a recent study, with the average percentage of 87.29% symptom-free within 5 to 10 minutes. Welcome to the Chronic Pain Relief Academy, where science meets soul and healing becomes reality. Led by the compassionate expertise of Dr. Paul, here are the real recovery stories. Tune in to be inspired, educated, and empowered to take your healing into your own hands and finally reclaim your life.
Dr. Paul, thank you so much for coming in today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So for a little bit of background on for the audience, tell me, who are you and what is it that you're doing?
I'm a chiropractor. I guess that's what everybody really wants to know. I'm a dad. I have 8 children, but I'm a chiropractor. I went to school in Los Angeles at Cleveland Chiropractic College, and I graduated there. And then after that, I did my orthopedics over at Los Angeles Chiropractic College, which got short by a bout with fibromyalgia. But I practiced in Southern California. We had a multidiscipline practice down there. We had gynecology and cardiology and anesthesiology. Well, we had like 5 MDs, 5 chiropractors, physical therapy, and about a 7,000 square foot office. It was really fun. We had a real good time down there, and that's when I got sick. And I don't know if you want to get into that or not, but I can tell you a little bit more about that too. But who I am really is, I'm a guy out here that has been given a gift. I honestly believe I found the cause of fibromyalgia, trigeminal, CRPS, and those type of things, most chronic pain, and we can get rid of it in almost everybody now. And I'm working hard at training people how to use these techniques and the new protocols we developed recently. For before were only manipulative for MDs and chiropractors. Now we can teach anybody, and we can get people out there getting people well. Even really sick spouses, they can send their spouses in and get trained and go back and take care of them. So I'm working hard at doing what I'm doing, having the time of my life.
I love it. And so we'll dive into that. But first, how did you get there, right? So you were a chiropractor for many years with a big practice, and then you got sick, right? Like, tell me about that. Like, what did you get diagnosed with? And then how did that lead to this discovery?
Well, like I said, I was right in the middle of, I was just a young guy, I was only like 40 years old and running this practice, living the dream, And all of a sudden one day I just couldn't get up out of bed. Just like in literally one day I went from totally active, killing it, having the great time. I'm 40 years old, and all of a sudden I'm in bed and I can't get up. I can't. I felt like this is the worst flu I've ever had in my life. And a couple of weeks later it's still there, and a month later it's still there, a year later it's still there. I can't sleep. I can't, it would take me 20 minutes to get from the bed to get up on my feet, just sort of slowly pushing myself out of bed. It was a horrible time. It was one of those times where it's like, how in the world can I live through this? In the meantime, I can't take care of my practice, and I got this big thing going. And in practice like that, doctors, they come in to learn from you, then they leave and get their own practice. So when they leave, I didn't have the energy to hire, and my practice just kept going down and down and down. And one thing led to another, and I ended up losing my practice, losing my home, losing my cars. And it just kind of, and when I look back on it, I just think, God, it was one of the best experiences of my life. Because it led me to figure out what was causing this, and it allowed me to know what my patients were feeling like. So when they came in and they're sitting here telling me about, their pain and their insomnia and their problems with their family, I'm like, yeah, I sit there in tears with them, just so often, because You know, I remember Bill Clinton used to say, "I feel your pain." You know, it's like, you really do. I think when you live through it, you really do. And I think you make a much better doctor. If you ever had cancer, wouldn't you rather go to a doctor that had cancer? You know, he would be much more empathetic and much more likely to take better care of you, I think. And so I'm very thankful for the opportunity to have been ill and gone through all that, to know how my patients go through it too.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's an important part of practice, right? A doctor, like being able to understand your patient's pain and what they're going through, allows you to provide better support, better help, and a better understanding, and lets the patients really know that you're like there for them, right? And, you know, it's unfortunate that happened to you, but it led to something remarkable, right? So let's dive into that. Like, what did you discover?
Well, it kind of had a progression. This whole thing started with fibromyalgia, and I thought that what I discovered only worked on fibromyalgia in the beginning. But originally, there was a doctor who found that, is an MD, a smart guy, and he got his hands on these fibromyalgia patients. So I'm going to figure this out. And he starts messing with him. He says, they all have scar tissue in their back. And scar tissue, fibro is for scar tissue, right? Fibrous tissue. Myo is muscle. So the scar tissue in the muscle is creating pain, and algia means pain. It's just the way you put medical words together. So he said, we'll call it fibromyalgia. And then the next guy comes along and he goes, well, I found all these tender spots. There's 18 tender spots that they have in common. And so if they have 12 of these, then they have fibromyalgia. We'll diagnose them that way. And then somebody else comes along and says, well, I think it's a combination of toxins, trauma, and stress. He goes, well, you know, and so that kind of stood out there like, you know, people would just say things and nobody knew any better. So it was just like, well, that's kind of the rule now. And so I'm thinking about all this and I'm going, well, that's so confusing. How are we ever going to research that and figure that out? And I said, I've had a lot of patients who had these symptoms after car accidents. What if it's just trauma? So then when I started looking at it neurologically, and a lot of these patients have full body pain, so I figure if they got full body pain, there's only a few things that are going to happen. Number one, they could have some kind of disease that's affecting the whole body, that's causing pain. Number two, if it's neurological, it's got to come above the brachial plexus in the neck. Otherwise, you couldn't have full body pain. Or it could be in the upper neck or the brain. You know, and so there's not a whole lot of things that would create full body pain. So I started looking at it as more of a brain problem, but that didn't work out either because you're going to have problems with the whole brain to create full body pain. So I ended up looking at the upper spinal cord, and I thought, well, I'm going to find that the vertebrae up there jammed into the spinal cord, and they weren't. And so now I'm getting real frustrated. And so then I started playing with the idea that maybe it was the covering of the spinal cord that was being affected. And that's when I made my breakthrough. And I started developing a technique, because in chiropractic, we're taught to do things kind of, chiropractors get on the back of the neck and bang on the back of the neck all the time. And for these people, it almost always made it worse. And so I figured out a technique where I could decompress that area, and it worked. And these really sick people started getting well. And then somebody referred in a friend of theirs who was a Delta Force Marine. This guy was cool. He was 3 tours in Vietnam. Guess what his job was?
What?
Breaking people out of prisoner of war camps. How would you like to have that job?
That's crazy.
3 tours, and his last tour, he got captured. He said, I don't know where these guys came from, but me and my 4 buddies were going underneath the fence, and all of a sudden, we got all these guns aimed at us, and he said, they put me in an 8-foot hole. Excuse me. They put me in an 8-foot hole where I couldn't move my arms, and they wouldn't take you out to go to the bathroom. And he said they just leave you in there. Then they had a hook where they'd hook you and yank you out and take you out and put bags over your head. And while you're walking, they'd hit you in the back of the neck with gun butts. And then you'd fall on the ground and jerk around because it screwed you up so badly. And then they give you some nasty old rice, put you back in the hole, take you out to torture you once in a while, and because they weren't real happy about people stealing their prisoners. Anyway, that was what he went through, and that's how he ended up with fibromyalgia, getting hit in the back of the neck like that. And one day he was traveling to get food, and they didn't have a bag over his head, and when his guy stopped to light a cigarette, when he brought his hand up, he caught him in the neck. And then grabbed him, broke his neck, and ran. And so he's got these guys running through the jungle with being shot at by their captors chasing him. And anyway, he ended up getting back to the American lines and surviving. And so he got in to see me, but he was so sick. He was so sick. He'd just sit and stare, could barely function at all. And he just said, "I'm just so miserable and can't sleep." And then he was being tortured by what he'd done. He said, I see all the faces of the people that I killed. He said, "I can't sleep. I wake up shaking in the middle of the night and sweating." And anyway, so we worked on him and got him well, and he was like so happy, you know. And so he said, "I've got a friend of mine that has a mom that's been shut in, and she's been living for 18 years in this trailer and doesn't go out, doesn't shower, doesn't talk to people." And so they went and got her, his buddy did, and brought her in. I would ask her a question and she'd answer something else. So I went on asking her all of the questions a doctor would ask about case history and what's happened and how did it all happen and all that things. And I got zero answers. I got absolutely zero answers. And so I thought, shoot, I'm just going to start working on her and see what I can do, because I can't get a case history. Couldn't get a good examination because she wouldn't answer me well. And she was literally, I mean, she belonged in an institution. She looked like a bag lady. She, like I said, she didn't bathe, so she didn't smell well, and her hair was just kind of sticking up all over. And I walked in my office 2 weeks later, and she's sitting in my waiting room just bawling her eyes out. I mean, it's just like she's wet with tears. I mean, it was like heavy weeping. And I walked in, I go, "Jan," I said, "What's wrong?" And she goes, "There's nothing wrong." She says, "Right." She said, "I'm back." So I'm back. I was just wondering who I'd be if I'd have been here for the last 18 years. You know, and then so I worked on her, and she continued getting better. And then she'd come in, showered with her hair done and her makeup on, and taking walks. And then she started gardening and making friends. Anyway, she got well. She got completely well, and it was one of the things that encouraged me to go on with the work and develop new findings and new protocols and new ways of helping people. And then she would come in after that. She'd come in and just meet the patients and encourage them, you know, and tell her story and everything.
That's crazy. I mean, it's life-changing, right? Like these people that are experiencing these pains, that's holding them back. I mean, you were telling me before we started filming about some other stories too, with people out in a wheelchair. You know, can you tell me a little bit more about those stories?
I've never had a person that came in a wheelchair that had, you know, that we test people, and then if they test well and the pain goes away on the first day, we know that we can help them. And so everybody we treated that came in a wheelchair. I had one woman that didn't get well, but she didn't have a hip, so she didn't get out of her wheelchair. But anyway, but everybody got out of their wheelchairs that came in. But I had this one, there was a couple of women that were really special, I thought. They were all special, but they were two wheelchair buddies, and they would, you know, if they had a school event, they'd be sitting back in their wheelchairs, but they were real sick, and especially this one, she actually called me yesterday, which I think was phenomenally, what a coincidence, but she said, "I couldn't figure out where to put the forks and the spoons. I just sit there and stare at the silverware drawer, wondering how I'm going to get this silverware put away." And people say, "Well, that sounds a little exaggerated," but it isn't. These people are so sick that a lot of them are, you know, like street people. I think a lot of the people that live in the street are like this. So she came in, she couldn't sit up. We had to lie her down, you know, and take her case history and look at her and everything. And we started working on her. In a couple of weeks, she's out of her wheelchair. She was walking. And her girlfriend came with her, and she's out of her wheelchair. Now, all of a sudden, they're going on walks and barbecuing and doing all these things and having a good time together. And I had the hardest person I ever saw to get out of the wheelchair was this beautiful woman named Maria. And she was an American who lived in Germany, grew up in Germany, and was a missionary to Thailand. And so she spoke English, German, and Thai fluently. And it took me 4 weeks to get her out. And the whole office was so excited because they all got around her, and everybody's going around, and I put it on video, and they're going, Maria, Maria, come on, Maria. And they were all standing around, and finally she stands up out of her wheelchair and walks for the first time. And, you know, those are the kind of moments you just remember forever in the office. You know, and because our patients came in and stayed, you know, they all flew in from all over the world, and they would just stay there and rent hotels. So they all became buddies, and they ate together and went to places together. And today they're still buddies. They still talk and keep up with each other. It's really pretty special. But that's kind of how in the beginning it started, and that's the wheelchair. But the wheelchair people had to walk 3 or 4 miles a day by the time they left, just like everybody else. And so,
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy what you're doing out there, right? It's changing lives.
it's so much fun.
You know, and walk me through the process. You know, is this a pill they're taking? Like, what is it?
The nice thing about it is it's not surgery, it's not injections, it's not medication. It turns out that there is a constriction in the upper neck that puts pressure on the covering of the spinal cord, the meninges. And that covering, the dura mater, is strong. You can't stretch it. So you can pull on the top, and it can pull on nerves all up and down your spine. So when the patients come in and they say, I have pain like all over my body. Well, everybody who's studied medicine has studied in a book called Correlative Neural Anatomy. And that's where we take our neural anatomy from. And it's a great book. And part of the book, it talks about stocking glove neuralgia. Stocking glove neuralgia is when you have, let's say a patient comes in and their whole hand, their entire hand is numb or is in pain or is burning or whatever. They call that stocking glove neuralgia. And the diagnosis for that is hysteria. So now you've got somebody who you know is suffering so greatly, but now they come in and the doctors think you're hysterical. So that's why they get referred off to the psychiatrist so often. So what we found is it's not hysteria. It's actually the spinal that whole meninges pulling on nerve roots, making them fire, that creates, you can pull on lots of nerve roots and create widespread pain. And you don't have to be hysterical to have widespread pain. You can have it from this meninges being pulled on. And when we decompress that manually, just physically in a few minutes, the pain melts right before your eyes. And many times they're in a wheelchair, they stand up and they'll start walking around. I got a woman in Ohio I worked on recently, and she's walking around. And I said, when the last time you walked? She said, it's been 5 years. And it's just, and it's horrible what being in a wheelchair all that time can do to you also. But so it's actually being caused by a constriction on the spinal cord structures. You pull on the meninges, it pulls on large groups of nerves. If you pull in large groups of nerves, it sends too many impulses to your brain for it to function properly. So you get what they call fibro fog, where you just can't think, and you just kind of get foggy minded. It uses up your RAM, but it also puts you into sympathetic. That's why some of the new science coming out saying, well, the central nervous system is hyperactive. Well, of course it's hyperactive because you're pulling on so many nerve roots that it's firing too many impulses to the brain. That's why it's hyperactive, but they're missing that part. So as a hyperactive brain, you know, you go into sympathetic. It shocks the brain. Now you're living in sympathetic because it's not supposed to be like that. Sympathetic, there's an automatic nervous system, and half of it's parasympathetic, half of it's sympathetic. And the parasympathetic is where you are right now. You're digesting food, you know, maybe you had breakfast, it's still digesting, or if you go home, you're relaxing and, you know, in parasympathetic. You have sex in parasympathetic. That's why guys who get nervous and get into sympathetic doesn't function very well, right? And so in sympathetic, the sleep shuts down. You don't need it. Your digestion shuts down. You don't need it. Your reproduction shuts down. You don't need it. Your blood pressure goes up. to help get the blood out there to the muscle so you can fight or run or whatever. And now you become vigilant and anxious all the time, and anxiety is just a feeling of forthcoming destruction. That's the diagnosis. I mean, the definition of it. And so all of these things going on at one time, it just drives you absolutely crazy. And if you turn that rheostep up high enough, you can't speak anymore. You can't walk anymore. Or your ears are ringing real loud, or a whole combination of all these things all at one time. You know, the irritable bowel syndrome was horrible. The diarrhea, which leads to to leaky gut syndrome, which leads to autoimmune diseases, and on. The whole thing, your whole body just starts breaking down. Your relationships start breaking down, and you end up, if it's bad enough, you end up just at home. Just doing nothing, seeing nobody, just being miserably bored and miserable. And that's kind of the short version of it. But it not only can create fibromyalgia, it creates CRPS. I want to say RSD, what it used to be called. Trigeminal neuralgia, a whole lot of back problems like sciatica and things will respond really well to our test, and most of your neuropathies. And so this is a major breakthrough for everyone in medicine and chiropractic, for holistic practitioners that can use these techniques also, because they're just pressure techniques that we've developed. And so the world is going to be completely changed by this once the word gets out, because it's so powerful and it's so important. And all of these surgeons that are doing surgeries so they get worse instead of they get better after, like with the CRPS, they need to know this too. So when they get worse, they go, oh, yeah, I got a test for this. Come over here and we'll test you. And they go, oh, yeah, your pain went away. We can fix that now without surgery. Or maybe they test them ahead of time before they do surgery and fix things that without surgery they don't need surgery for, No,
I love this. And what's your favorite part about it?
Well, I think, obviously getting people out of pain and out of depression and going back to a normal life, but I really like to see the families get back together. I like to see a husband, he gets his wife back. And I say a husband get his wife back because about 80% of the time it's women who are sick. and all of a sudden they're on vacation again. They're making love again. They're enjoying life. They're doing the things they used to do. They're sitting up in the evening and talking and having nice conversations, going to the movies, and things where before, one of them just sat around the house all the time. And if it happens to be the husband is sick, especially if he's the main provider, now that creates a real financial stress on the family. Anymore you can't really say that because the women make so much money now too. But either way, if one of them's down, we're not in a society anymore where we have a one worker taking care of everything. Very seldom. We're in a society where everybody pitches in, and you lose one of your wage earners, just devastating for the families. Absolutely devastating.
So talk to me, what along this journey, have there been any pushback? Has there been any complications?
You can't find anything like this without getting lots of pushback. People, I can't tell you, I think my first year I got some chiropractors said, this is impossible. They turned me into the board and they came and investigated me and they go, no, you're doing a good job. And they let me go. And later on, board's back again investigating me. And this guy comes in, he's big old guy. I don't know, he must have been 6'4", and he worked for the board, but he used to be a railroad investigator, and then he was for the DMV, and now he was working for the state board. And he comes in and says, you guys are all going to jail. He said, if you guys are really doing what I heard you're doing, you're all going to jail. And I'm like, and I tried to talk to him. He wouldn't even talk to me, so finally I just go, this is not working. So I just walked away. And he followed me, and so I walked out in the waiting room and introduced him to my patients. And I said, this guy's in the state board. He's investigating to see what we're doing here. And I said, just tell him whatever you want. And so I went back to see patients. A couple hours later, I come out, and the guy is literally smiling and bouncing on his toes going, I can't believe it. They all love you, and they're all getting well. He said, I've never seen anything like this in my life. This is crazy what's going on here. And so they So I tried to say something to him. He goes, "No, you don't understand. They're all getting well." And he went through it. He goes like a little child. And I went, "This is the same guy that was going to put me in jail a few minutes ago." So they dropped everything and left. And then a couple of years later, ABC comes in, wants to do a special on me. "We're going to do a nice special. We heard you're doing great things." And it turned out to be a hit. They interviewed all my patients on tape, but they couldn't use them because they all said good things. And so they went into the state boards with the cameras rolling. "What are you going to do about this guy?" And I actually lost my license for a good reason. I'll say that honestly. But it wasn't purposely done. But what ended up happening is we got so busy I couldn't keep up with the patients, and so I hired a couple of doctors to see patients for me. And so between the three of us, we'd see the patients, and I'd do the report of findings and the exams and re-exams. And then once every 2 weeks, I'd take off and travel around the country and speak, usually someplace where one of the patients had gone home and invited me to speak in their hometown. And so it would be fun, and they would get up and tell their experience there. And they all had a good experience because, I mean, why wouldn't they? They're all getting well, right? You know, if you go to a place like that and you walk in and say, "Hey, how are you guys doing?" They go, "Oh, no, none of us are getting well." You just go back home again. You know, they were getting well, so we stayed. And so I would travel around and speak like that. And when I was traveling, oftentimes I'd be on TV or the radio somewhere, you know, because we'd call ahead of time and say I was coming. They go, "Oh, yeah, we'd love to have you on TV here." And so there's this one guy, and I'm a little nervous. I hadn't done a lot of radio at the time, and I'm on this radio station with him, and he's introducing me, and what he says, but I didn't hear him what he said because I was thinking about what I was going to say, and I didn't want to fumble. So I'm thinking, how am I going to start this? What am I going to say? How am I not going to sound like an idiot? And then he goes, "Isn't that right, Dr. Whitcomb?" And I go, "Yeah, that's right." And then I just went off. What he had said was, "I understand that you found the cure for fibromyalgia." And I just said yes to it. And that cost me my license. And I didn't even know he said it until they played it back to me years later. And it's like, so anyway, you got to be careful what you say. Like on a podcast like this, you know, I have to have a disclaimer. This is all my work. It's all my beliefs. It's the studies have all been studies have been done in our office. And this is, I can just explain to you what it all is. But the disclaimer is that I can't legally claim to have found anything. But I can tell you what I see, and I can tell you the results of our studies and those type of things. And so, yeah, no, I've had some blowback. And then later on, we had a research. There was a medical school in Texas and a big pharmaceutical research company. I want to use the same company that they used, so they couldn't say I use a crummy company, right? I think that was a mistake because they said, "Okay, we're going to charge you. This school's going to do follow-up. We're just going to look at it and publish it, but we want $50,000 to publish 50 patients." You know, and the school's going to do the write-up, and this one doctor was doing a thesis on what we were doing and all of that. And so what ended up happening, they said, "You're already approved. We love their work. This is awesome. It's going to be $50,000. And we said, "Okay, we'll give you the $50,000. You know, it's hard to come up. I don't care who you are. It's hard to come up with $50,000, right? And so okay, we'll do that. And they said it's going to take 3 months to get it through legal. So I said, fine. So 3 months later, they come back and say, "Well, you've been approved. You've gone through legal. Everything's good. We're going to do the research. But we have a little problem." And I go, "What's that?" And they go, "Well, we're going to have to charge you $400,000 instead of $50,000. And we're thinking, "Oh, we don't have $400,000 and throw into this. I'm sure if it would be worth it to have it for $400,000 because this is going to change the world, right?" And so we went back and talked about it and said, "Let's tell them we'll take it." So we went back and said, "Okay, we'll do it. We'll pay the $400,000." They called us 2 days and said, "We reviewed it again. It's going to be $800,000. So we realized that they had spoken to somebody, about what we were doing, and they go, "We don't want this kind of research being done here." So you make sure that they don't do it. And so they just priced us out of it, So anyway, I don't know for sure, but my guess is that they spoke to one of their pharmaceutical houses they do research for, and they go, if this is really true and this has really worked, it's going to cost us billions of dollars every month. And so that set us back quite a bit.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing about the healthcare industry, right? Is they're not in the business of necessarily fixing and keeping people well, right? Because they make so much money off of these drugs that there is that pushback when you have opportunities like this coming forward. Not with everybody, but...
You know, I have such a hard time with that. It just breaks my heart to think that anybody could be so evil as to shut down something that worked for these really sick people so they could make an extra buck. You know, is there really that much evil in the world that they would do that? You know, they get accused of pushing back cancer treatments and things so they can make more money on cancer. It's like, can the world be that evil? Could a government really take our own Twin Towers down to start a war? It just is incomprehensible. It's really hard for me to get a grasp on all of that. Excuse me. When we spend our whole lives just trying to get people well, and they would compromise that for their shareholders just to make an extra buck. Yeah, it's very difficult, very difficult. I think it's probably true, but and I don't think they're all like that. I mean, there's a lot of people, I think, that work for the drug companies just working their brains out, doing everything they can to find a new drug to help people. I mean, look what they did with AIDS. You know, you don't die from AIDS anymore. You know, that was huge what they did. You know, and the drugs they came up with, MS, and the drugs that they have to help people with fibromyalgia to be able to live with it. I mean, they've done such wonderful work, and I think most of the people over there are really good, high-quality people. And maybe some of them would compromise the patient's health for a buck. Yeah.
So with this technique, with this new discovery, is it only you that can do it, or can other practices learn and implement this stuff into their practices?
You know, originally it was all manipulation, so we could only teach MDs and chiropractors. And then a couple of years ago, I took a whole year and worked on new protocols that were pressure technique protocols, which can be taught literally to anybody. It's kind of like acupressure. And so I can train anybody. I can train anybody in it. I can certify them that they've been trained, and then we can get them licensed through a holistic licensing agency. And between the two of us, they can start a practice. And because we're focused so narrowly on this, they can do a really good job. You know, it's like, you know, you're a medical doctor because you go through school and you see so many different things and so much that's, you know, you need to know about. It's just when you get all done with medical school, you know, for me, when I got done with chiropractic school, it's the same. Even our teachers are medical doctors. It's just, if we study all the same stuff, when I got all done, I just don't know anything. You know, what you really learned was you learned how much there was to learn. You know, and a lot of it, you have reference books to look it up if you forget. But, you know, you just pack your brain full of so much during that time. I mean, my study hours every day between school and study were like 12 to 14 hours, 7 days a week. I mean, that's a heck of a deal getting through school. But when you get all done, you go, that's just so much to learn.
Yeah. I think we're going to have to do a part 2. We're going to have to dive deeper into this. I appreciate your time. Where can people find out more information about this if they're either struggling with pain, with some of these issues that you have the solution for, or if they're thinking about trying to implement this into their practice, where should they reach out?
You know, I've got a website at chronicpainreliefacademy.com. So it's pretty easy to remember, chronicpainreliefacademy.com. We've got some phone numbers if somebody wants to. If you can reach us at 530-307-2398, 530-307-2398, and we'll get you some help right away. Yeah, but if somebody wants to learn this, do you want a new profession? And the other thing, and I don't know if we'd mentioned this, is we can train the spouses of sick people to come in and get the training, go home and take care of them. They don't have to take a sick person out and travel and stay in hotels for months. They can actually get them well themselves. And That's just over the top. I'll probably get some flack for that because I don't think that's ever been done before, but this can be done. And,
I appreciate it.
yeah.
Thank you for coming out.
You're welcome. Thank you for the interview. I appreciate it.
There's been a major breakthrough in chronic pain in a recent study, with the average percentage of 87.29% symptom-free within 5 to 10 minutes. Welcome to the Chronic Pain Relief Academy, where science meets soul and healing becomes reality. Led by the compassionate expertise of Dr. Paul, here are the real recovery stories. Tune in to be inspired, educated, and empowered to take your healing into your own hands and finally reclaim your life.